When inflation hit 9.1 in June of 2022, Americans felt it everywhere. And how could we not? It was the largest jump since 1981. It showed up in rising prices at the grocery store, gas pumps, and most services. But instead of looking at the root cause of the issue, our media outlets seem to have a different agenda. Both liberal and conservative news shows pointed fingers at the stimulus checks handed out by the last two presidents. Yep, apparently it was your fault for having some extra cash in your pocket. But let's be real here. The only thing rising faster than the price of milk was the absurdity of that argument. I mean, did anyone stop to question what they were really saying? Economists are now claiming that inflation is slowly coming down, even though many of us are still feeling the pinch with it being at 5%. Despite inflation falling, some state lawmakers approved inflation relief checks in 2022, including the following states. Well, looks like government functions sometimes, with 17 states waking up and smelling the coffee. They recognized that inflation was causing some serious pain, and instead of waiting for Biden, they decided to take action. Bravo. But while these states are making moves to address the issue, it seems like the folks in Washington couldn't be bothered. Why, you ask? Well, I hate to break it to you, but it's the same old story. The checks are evil rhetoric is making the rounds again. It's like a bad case of deja vu, only this time it's even more frustrating. These stimulus checks are meant to help struggling Americans keep their heads above water. It's not like cash is being handed out to people for no reason. So now with some states stepping up and offering another round of relief checks, cue the skeptics and naysayers. But this time it's not just the news pundits questioning the move. No, I'm seeing my fellow Americans join in on the chorus. They're saying that these relief checks are a curse, not a blessing, and are shouting on social media about how they will only make inflation worse. Let's be clear. Providing financial relief isn't going to make our situation worse. It's alleviating suffering that has its own cost. The money is keeping people in housing and children fed. And this line of thinking is the same as giving someone water when they're thirsty and expecting them to be dehydrated. It just doesn't make sense. Here, how about we take a minute and consider another possibility for inflation, one that doesn't come down from corporate figureheads. You know, one based on common sense. First, let's examine the rhetoric. Technically, most economists aren't pinning the blame solely on stimulus checks or stimmies, so to speak. They claim inflation was also caused by increased wage growth and the money spent on the American Rescue Plan and CARES Act. You know, also the programs that kept many Americans housed and fed during the last few trying years. Bottom line, they're blaming the fact that Americans weren't desperate and deprived enough as usual for bringing down the economy. Okay, maybe it's not that simple. Well, actually it kind of is. Their theory is simple. When wages increase, or when regular folks like you and I have more money to spend, businesses will try to sell us more products to meet the increased demand. To do this, they need to hire more people, which drives up the cost of selling us their products. And when business costs go up, they're most likely to pass those costs on to the consumer in the form of higher prices. Thus, inflation. Seems logical, right? Hold up a minute. Something doesn't add up. You see, while news outlets and economists were reporting that prices were on the rise, they were also talking about labor shortages. So if there were truly labor shortages, then businesses should be struggling to find workers to meet demand. And if they're struggling to find workers, then why did prices go up? Maybe it's not that us lazy Americans got spoiled with all that free money and didn't want to work. And you might be thinking that they had to raise wages to entice workers. Sorry, the numbers show that the wages didn't go up until after inflation had already happened. Actually, when you look at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, real wages, wages minus the cost of living, well, there was no wage increase. Actually, wages went down 3.5%. Oh, and I just want to make a quick side note here. I find it pretty ironic how some people are quick to point the finger at workers making more money, while ignoring the fact that CEO and executive pay has been skyrocketing for years. And to make matters worse, many companies have been cutting worker wages at the same time that they're doing stock buybacks. Yet no one seems to complain about CEO pay increases and stock buybacks contributing to rising prices. Funny how that works, right? It seems like some people are more interested in protecting the interests of the wealthy while ignoring the struggles of the rest of us. And I know there's somebody out there saying, come on, AE, giving a few people millions of dollars while companies buy back $300 billion, yes, with a B, $300 billion worth of stock buybacks isn't the same as giving workers the pay increases they deserve to deal with inflation. I'll try hard not to roll my eyes. All right, fine. Let's look at another thing that's hella sus. Usually when inflation happens, three things happen as well. Unemployment goes down, workers make more money, and then company profits, and that's the important one, take a hit. After all, they're paying all those higher salaries to more people, right? Nope. The Economic Policy Institute pointed out that in April 2022, that the opposite happened. That when corporate profit margins soared, they did so right as they raised prices. And the whole profit margins soaring might have something to do with this crazy notion that companies are naturally supposed to make a profit every year, no matter what. Regardless of what is happening in the world, they're never to break even, let alone take a loss a year or two. Am I the only one seeing a problem? And don't take my word for it. Every American has witnessed the reality with their own eyes. Businesses are making massive profits, but when things started to go back to normal in 2022, customer service became horrific. Longer lines at grocery stores and retail chains, restaurants being short-staffed, and every kind of service being cut back. The elephant in the room sitting in the corner that everyone's ignoring is that greedy corporations decided to raise their prices for one and only one reason, because they could. Meat packers claimed that beef prices were soaring because of inflation, even though cattle ranchers didn't raise their prices. Car manufacturers blamed semiconductor supply issues, but then let it slip that they were purposely undersupplying cars when the issue was resolved. Oh, and the retailer responsible for price hikes at TJ Maxx, Marshalls, and home goods stores, well, they revealed during a board meeting that consumers expect higher prices right now. See, we shouldn't blame them. They're just giving us what we expect. Now, before you throw up your hands in frustration and give up on the idea of holding companies accountable, I want to remind you that some economists have been brave enough to call out the hypocrisy of stock buybacks. Think about it. Companies like the airlines received aid money from taxpayers to help them weather the worst of the last few years. And what did they do with that money? Instead of investing in their workers or making tangible improvements to their services, they turned around and cut staff while buying back their own stock. In some cases, they spent as much as 80 to 96% of taxpayer money. Now, this didn't have to be the case. The aid money could have come with specific conditions. Like the mean testing they do on us before giving us back our money. Ones that could have ensured that it was going to be used responsibly. After all, this isn't the first time that companies have received government money and failed to use it for the greater good. It's like the government wants to play a game of who can make the economy worse. We're dealing with inflation, lower wages, and a looming recession. But apparently, according to Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen, the solution is to make even more people unemployed. They claim that only 5 to 10% of unemployment is needed to get inflation under control. And with interest rate hikes, they're working hard at it. Brilliant, guys. Just brilliant. So while stimulus checks could be a lifeline for struggling Americans, we're being told that they're the devil incarnate. Meanwhile, no one wants to talk about regulating monopolies or holding companies accountable for misusing bailout money. Apparently, those subjects are taboo. So I can't help but find it crazy that there are actual Americans crying foul over stimulus checks. but yet they'll turn a blind eye to the government and corporate America's corrupt shenanigans. Can we stop it? Accepting the idea that we have to sacrifice the financial stability of millions of Americans just to keep the economy afloat is just wrong. And if the problem with stimulus checks is that too many people aren't suffering enough, well, then we have a bigger problem than we think.
Losing time, I'm fading fast. I just wanna make it last. Try to let go of the past. I close my eyes, embrace the blast.